Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we're going to dim the lights on some of history's most stubborn questions. The kinds of mysteries that historians argue about in hushed tones over stale coffee. The kind that defy easy answers. Imagine a tapestry of history with a few frayed threads, not just loose ends, but threads that seem to vanish into thin air, leaving us to wonder who pulled them and why. You're about to fall headfirst into a few of those missing moments, so vivid and strange that you'll probably feel the need to check the locks on your doors and maybe sleep with a slightly brighter nightlight than usual. You probably won't survive this journey with your sense of rational reality fully intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on a sun-scorched plain in what is now southeastern Turkey, squinting against the shimmering heat haze. It's 53 BC, the air is thick with dust and the metallic scent of sweat and fear. You are one of the 40,000 Roman soldiers under the command of Marcus Licinius Crassus, a man so rich his name became synonymous with wealth, but a man also desperate for military glory to match his immense fortune. He has marched you here, deep into Parthian territory, to fight the very empire that will become Rome's great eastern rival. The battle you're about to witness is a masterclass in ancient warfare, but not for your side. The Parthians, mounted archers and heavily armoured cataphracts, are like nothing you've ever faced. Their bows can pierce your armour, and their cavalry can outmaneuver your disciplined legions with ease. All around you, the air fills with a deadly hail of arrows, and you see your comrades falling, not to hand-to-hand combat, but to a silent, relentless storm of missiles from a distance you can't hope to reach. The Roman phalanx, so effective in Europe, is here little more than a collective tomb. The battle is a disaster of epic proportions. Crassus himself is killed, and nearly two-thirds of his army is either dead or captured. But here's where the story gets really strange. While most of the survivors either surrendered or scattered, history records the disappearance of a specific group of Roman soldiers, the remnants of a legion, about 10,000 men, who vanished from the historical record in the chaos after the Battle of Carrhae. They were a ghost legion, marching into the silence of the East. Mainstream history tells us a few things about this kind of event. Roman legions were incredibly well-documented units. Their movements, their commanders, their deployments, all of it was meticulously recorded. So for a significant number of legionaries to simply disappear from the pages of history is, to put it mildly, deeply unusual. We know they didn't all make it back to Rome. We know they weren't all killed on the field. So where did they go? The popular theory, one that has been around for centuries, is that they were taken prisoner by the Parthians and marched east, into the heart of the empire. But that's where the trail goes cold. For centuries, this was just an unsolved footnote. Then, in the 20th century, a quirky or perhaps outright fringe tidbit emerged that breathed new life into the mystery. In the 1930s, a team of Russian archaeologists working in modern-day Kyrgyzstan discovered something truly remarkable. A tomb belonging to a Han Dynasty general. But inside, among the usual artefacts, they found something that seemed utterly out of place. A banner with a Roman eagle emblem and the remains of men who, based on anthropological analysis, had European features. This was thousands of miles from the Battle of Carrhae, in a region the Romans never ever reached. Could these have been the descendants of the Lost Legion? The idea is tantalizing. Historians still argue whether these discoveries in Central Asia are conclusive proof, or simply an interesting coincidence. The case for a connection rests on a series of historical breadcrumbs. Ancient Chinese records from the same period describe a strange battle against a nomadic tribe that used a peculiar fish scale formation, a description that some scholars believe matches the Roman testudo formation, a defensive tactic where soldiers' shields interlock to form a protective shell. The Chinese chroniclers were baffled by this unusual tactic, and they even mentioned capturing some of the enemy soldiers who were described as having fair hair and blue eyes, a description that would certainly fit our lost Roman soldiers. The tale gets even more compelling. The captured warriors, it is said, were eventually settled by the Chinese emperor in a border town, which was later renamed Lykian. Now, here's where it gets even more unbelievable. Modern DNA analysis of the inhabitants of this remote Chinese village has shown that a significant number of them possess European genetic markers. a shocking genetic link in a region that has been culturally and genetically isolated for centuries. When you hear things like that, you have to wonder if it's the ultimate answer to an age-old riddle, or just another strange coincidence that leads us down a rabbit hole. The idea of these soldiers, defeated and captured, being marched for years across deserts and mountains, and then fighting for a new emperor thousands of miles from home, is both tragic and incredibly heroic. They were professional soldiers after all. Their loyalty was to the Legion, and once that was gone, perhaps their loyalty transferred to whoever commanded them next. Think about it. You've lost your home, your commander is dead, your comrades have been scattered. What do? Do you give up, or do you find a way to survive? You'd probably do anything to survive, even if it meant fighting for a different banner in a land you'd never heard of. You'd become part of a new world, a new history. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what they did. Maybe they found a way to not just survive, but to thrive, to pass on their genes and their story, even if the world they came from had long forgotten them. And perhaps the wind on the plains of Central Asia still carries the echo of a Roman marching song, a faint memory of a legion that chose to disappear into a new dawn rather than face the humiliation of a return home. It's a beautiful thought, a kind of redemption, isn't it? The sun-baked plains of Parthia are now a distant memory, a faint dust cloud on the horizon. The marching feet of a lost legion have faded into silence. Now let's travel much, much farther west, to a far more hushed and intimate kind of mystery. You're now sitting in a quiet, climate-controlled room in a library at Yale University. The air smells of old paper and quiet contemplation. Before you, on a velvet cushion, lies a small book bound in soft vellum. It feels light in your hands, almost insubstantial, but it carries a weight that has crushed the spirits of countless cryptographers and linguists for over a century. This is the Voynich manuscript. It's an enigma wrapped in an enigma, tucked inside another enigma, and then sealed with a secret. The book is named after Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish book dealer who acquired it in 1912 from a Jesuit college in Italy. The carbon dating says it's from the early 15th century, but that's about all anyone can say for sure. The rest of the book is a baffling mess of contradictions and questions. You turn the page, and you're met with a strange and beautiful script that doesn't belong to any known language. The letters are flowing and elegant, almost like they're dancing on the page, but they form no discernible words. It's not just a substitution cipher. The letter and word frequencies don't match any of the patterns you'd expect from a European language. It's like a song written with notes that don't exist. Mainstream historical fact, in this case, is the simple, stubborn reality that nobody has ever translated a single word of the Voynich manuscript. It has defied the best minds in the world, from World War II codebreakers to modern-day computer algorithms. Even the very best supercomputers have analysed it and come back with an exasperated shrug. It's a stubborn, silent object that refuses to give up its secrets. For a book that's only about 240 pages long, it has generated an entire library of theories. The quirky or fringe tidbit in this section isn't just about the language, it's about the pictures. As you flip through the manuscript, you'll see a series of bizarre, often unsettling illustrations. There's the herbal section, which depicts plants that have no known parallel in nature. They look like something a botanist from a different planet might have catalogued. Some of them seem to be composites of different real-world plants, a Frankenstein's monster of foliage. Then there's the astronomical section, with strange diagrams of celestial bodies that don't match up with any known constellations. You see swirling suns and moons, and what look like zodiac signs that have had a very, very rough night. But the oddest are the balneological section, filled with illustrations of tiny naked women bathing in what look like interconnected green pipes, or pools. They're smiling and relaxed, as if this bizarre plumbing network is completely normal. What in the world is going on here? Is this some sort of spa manual for an alien race? You have to laugh a little at the absurdity, but also wonder at the mind that created such images. This is a book that has been called a hoax, a cipher, a magical text, a record of an extinct language, and everything in between. It has been theorized to be a practical joke by an artist who just wanted to watch the world burn. It has been suggested to be a genuine record of a lost civilization. The sheer amount of effort that went into creating this manuscript, the meticulous detail of both the script and the illustrations, makes it hard to believe it's a simple prank. Would someone spend years of their life, hundreds of hours, to create a massive, detailed and utterly pointless joke? It just doesn't seem plausible. On the other hand, the idea that it's a genuine book with a real untranslated language is almost equally unbelievable. How could such a language just disappear? The history of human communication is a messy thing, but rarely does an entire complex written language simply vanish without a trace. Historians still argue whether the manuscript is a clever forgery or a genuine work written in an unknown language. The debate is a fascinating one, because each side has a compelling argument. The pro-forgery side points to the fact that the text appears to be gibberish, in the purest sense of the word. They argue that if it were a coded language, there would be patterns, recurring letters, a rhythm, even if it wasn't immediately obvious. A famous example of this is the Caesar cipher, where every letter is simply shifted a certain number of spaces down the alphabet. A computer would crack that in seconds. The Voynich manuscript, however, seems to have been written with an unnatural frequency distribution. It almost feels like the person who wrote it was trying to avoid patterns, almost as if they were trying to create a false language. The anti-forgery side, however, has a counter-argument that is just as compelling. The illustrations. If this were just a prank, why go to such lengths? Why draw hundreds of intricate, detailed pictures? What was the purpose? The balneological illustrations in particular, with their curious little bathing women, feel strangely specific. They aren't generic doodles. They have a style and a consistent theme throughout the book. And then there's the matter of the botanical drawings. While the plants themselves are fictional, the style and detail with which they are drawn are consistent with the botanical illustrations of the time. The person who drew this was no amateur. They were a skilled and knowledgeable artist. The most bizarre tidbit I can share with you is about one of the most persistent theories, that the manuscript is a work of alchemy, an obscure record of a medieval herbalist, or perhaps even an extraterrestrial botanical text. You see, the illustrations of the plants are so strange that some people have suggested that they are not from Earth at all. This is, of course, a wild, unsupported theory, but it speaks to the frustration the manuscript has caused. When all logical explanations fail, people start looking for the illogical ones. And what could be more illogical, and therefore strangely fitting, than a book from another world? The truth is, no one really knows. The Voynich manuscript remains a defiant testament to our own limitations. We can send rovers to Mars, we can sequence the human genome, but we can't read a book written by a human being. It's like being a world-class chef who is handed a cookbook written in a language they can't understand, full of pictures of ingredients they've never seen. They can see the care that went into the book, the love of the craft, but they can't taste the food. And that is exactly how you feel when you hold the Voynich manuscript. You can feel the intention and the effort, but you are forever barred from its meaning. It's a beautiful, frustrating, and utterly silent monument to a mind we will never know. The ancient coded pages of the Voynich manuscript are now closed, the bizarre bathing figures and alien flora fading back into their silence. Let's leave the hushed halls of academia and step into the wide-open, dusty plains of New Mexico. The sun beats down on the adobe walls of the small, picturesque town of Taos. It's a place known for its artists, its serene landscapes, and its spiritual energy. But for some, this quiet, beautiful town is a source of torment. You're walking down a quiet street and you stop. Do you hear that? Probably not. It's not the kind of sound you just hear. It's the kind of sound you feel. This is the Taos hum. It's a persistent, low-frequency hum, a constant droning noise that seems to emanate from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. The hum is not a new phenomenon. People in Taos have been complaining about it for decades, but it's a frustratingly personal and inconsistent mystery. For some residents, it's a living nightmare. It keeps them awake at night, it causes headaches, nausea, and a persistent low-grade anxiety. For others, it's completely inaudible. You could be standing right next to someone who's being driven crazy by the hum, and you would hear absolutely nothing. It's a phantom noise, a shared hallucination for some, a silent terror for others. Mainstream science has been trying to pinpoint the source of the Taos hum for years, and it has come up completely empty-handed. Researchers from the University of New Mexico and Los Alamos National Laboratory have descended on the town with sophisticated sound monitoring equipment, but their instruments rarely pick up the hum. When they do, the sound is so faint and low frequency that it's almost inaudible, and it doesn't appear to have a single consistent source. The sound waves, if they are sound waves, seem to behave in a way that defies conventional physics. One of the leading mainstream theories is that the hum is a form of acoustic psychoacoustics. Basically, the sound is a side effect of a different, larger phenomenon, or perhaps even a neurological condition in a small percentage of the population. But this theory is problematic too. While it might explain why some people hear it and others don't, it doesn't explain what's causing the underlying disturbance in the first place. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. Some people who hear the hum aren't just bothered by it. They are utterly convinced it is a form of mind control. They believe it is a secret government experiment designed to manipulate a small subset of the population, perhaps to test a new form of psychological warfare. You can laugh at that, and it's certainly a far-fetched idea, but when you are a person who is constantly being tortured by a sound that no one else can hear, you start to look for extreme explanations. The idea that a vast, invisible conspiracy is behind your suffering is, in a strange way, more comforting than the idea that you're just a random victim of an inexplicable natural phenomenon. It gives your suffering a purpose, a name, even if it's a crazy name. Another equally bizarre but slightly more plausible fringe theory is that the hum is a side effect of military technology. New Mexico is home to several high-security military and research facilities, and the theory goes that some of these facilities are using a form of low-frequency radio waves for communication, radar, or even weapons testing, and that the hum is a byproduct of that activity. The hum, according to this theory, is not a sound at all but a physical vibration that some people are more sensitive to than others. This would explain why some people hear it, and why scientific instruments have a hard time picking it up. Historians and scientists still argue whether the hum is a localized phenomenon or part of a larger global one. It turns out that Taos is not alone. Over the years, similar low-frequency hums have been reported in places all over the world, from Bristol in England to Windsor, Canada. Each of these places has its own unique hum, but the common thread is the same. It's a low-frequency, persistent noise that only a fraction of the population can hear, and no one can figure out where it comes from. Is this an acoustic phenomenon that is happening all over the globe but only in certain places? Or is it a collective psychological phenomenon? Let's take a moment to imagine what it must be like to be one of the people who hears the hum. You wake up in the morning, and it's there. You go to work, and it's there. You go to bed at night, and it's there. It's a constant low-grade buzzing in your head, a sound that is both maddeningly present and maddeningly absent. You try to explain it to your friends and family, but they just look at you with a mix of pity and disbelief. They tell you to see a doctor or to get a new hobby. They don't understand that the hum isn't something you can just ignore. It's a part of you now, a constant companion that you never asked for. I remember once reading about a person who, after years of suffering from the hum, finally moved to a different part of the country. They said that for the first few weeks, the silence was so loud that it was almost as deafening as the hum had been. Their brain had become so used to the constant buzzing that the lack of it was just as unsettling. It's a reminder that our brains are incredibly adaptable, for better or for worse. The fact that the human brain can adapt to a constant low-frequency hum is both a testament to our resilience and a terrifying thought. What other noises are we just tuning out? What other strange phenomena are we simply learning to live with? The Taos hum is a beautiful example of a mystery that is both scientific and deeply personal. It's a scientific puzzle, but it's also a deeply human one. It's a reminder that there are still things in this world that we don't understand, and that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not out in space or buried in ancient tombs, but right here, in a small town in New Mexico, vibrating in the air around us. And you know, the most chilling thing about it all is that, even as you're listening to this and thinking about it, you might be hearing it too, but you just don't know it yet. It's an auditory ghost, a shared secret that you might be a part of without even realizing it. The hum is just one of those things that, once you're aware of it, you can't ever really ignore it again. It's a quiet hum in the background of a peaceful life, but for some, it's a silent scream. The Taos hum's low drone fades into the silence of the American Southwest. The dusty adobe and shimmering heat are replaced by the salty tang of the sea. You're now in a grand library in Istanbul, the year 1929. The air is cool and smells of old paper and leather. A team of German archaeologists is meticulously cataloguing artefacts in the former Ottoman palace. They're sifting through dusty drawers and forgotten documents when they come across something that stops them cold. A map, drawn on a gazelle skin. It's not just any map. It's a 16th century nautical chart, meticulously drawn and signed by a famous Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis. The map itself is a marvel, showing the known world with a stunning degree of accuracy for its time. It's a testament to the sophisticated knowledge of ancient mariners. But then you look a little closer, and the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. The map depicts the coastlines of West Africa and the eastern coast of South America with a startling level of detail. But down at the very bottom, in an area that should be filled with empty ocean, is the unmistakable coastline of Antarctica. Not just a vague outline, but a detailed map of a continent that wasn't officially discovered until 1820, and whose coastline would not be fully mapped until the advent of modern sonar and satellite technology. The map even shows a landmass connected to the tip of South America, a feature that would only be possible if the continent wasn't covered in its massive ice sheet. Mainstream historical fact dictates that Antarctica was discovered in the 19th century by a Russian expedition, and its subglacial topography was a mystery until the 20th century. So, how could a 16th century mapmaker have such intimate knowledge of a continent that was completely unknown to the rest of the world? It's an impossible contradiction, a historical time paradox. The map, now known as the Piri Reis map, is a genuine artifact, a well-documented piece of history, and it has caused a schism among historians and cartographers ever since its discovery. The quirky or fringe tidbit is what Piri Reis himself wrote on the map. He added several notes, or kitab, detailing his sources. He claims his map is a compilation, not his original work. He says he used about 20 ancient charts, including some drawn by Christopher Columbus and some even more ancient maps that he describes as having been passed down through the ages. So, the map isn't a miraculous anomaly. It's a copy of something even older. Piri Reis himself is not claiming to have discovered Antarctica, but rather to have gotten the information from sources that were already ancient in his time. This only deepens the mystery. Where did those maps come from? Who charted a landmass that was, by all accounts, covered in a 2-mile thick sheet of ice for tens of thousands of years? This leads us to a truly mind-bending possibility. What if the source maps used by Piri Reis were made during a time when Antarctica was not covered in ice? Geologists tell us the last time Antarctica was ice-free was over 10,000 years ago, well before the dawn of any known civilization capable of global exploration and cartography. This is where the fringe theories really take over. Some suggest that a technologically advanced ancient civilization existed thousands of years ago, a civilization that possessed the technology to accurately map the entire globe, including a landmass that is now hidden under a massive ice cap. Was it a lost civilization like Atlantis, or was it something else entirely? Historians still argue whether the map is an accurate depiction of the Antarctic coastline, or a fascinating but ultimately coincidental drawing. The skeptics have a few compelling arguments. They point out that the southern coastline on the Piri Reis map is not a perfect match for the actual landmass of Antarctica. They argue that the so-called Antarctic portion of the map is just a crude or mislabeled representation of the coast of South America, perhaps a misplaced coastline from one of his sources. It's a plausible argument, but it doesn't fully explain the level of detail on the map, nor the fact that it seems to show a landmass where there should be none. The defenders of the map's authenticity, however, point to the fact that the map seems to show a river system flowing into the sea, a feature that would only be possible in a land that was not covered in ice. The debate is fascinating because it forces us to confront our own assumptions about history. We tend to think of history as a linear progression, from simple societies to more complex ones, from crude maps to accurate ones. But what if that's not true? What if there were periods of incredible technological or geographical knowledge that were simply lost to the sands of time? The Piri Reis map is a ghost in the machine of history, a tantalizing glimpse of a world we thought we knew, a world where the past might have been far more advanced than we give it credit for. Think back to the lost Roman legion. Their story is one of survival and assimilation. They were a known group of people who simply disappeared from the record. The Piri Reis map is the opposite. It is an artifact of knowledge that shouldn't have existed in the first place. It suggests that a culture or a group of people, unknown and unrecorded, possessed a geographical understanding of the globe that was centuries ahead of its time. Who were they? How did they acquire this knowledge? And perhaps most importantly, why did they disappear? The most chilling and beautiful thought is that the Peary Race map might be the last remaining piece of a global civilization we've completely forgotten. Imagine a world where people travelled and mapped the entire globe thousands of years ago. A world that was destroyed by some cataclysm, or simply faded into the obscurity of prehistory. The Peary Race map is not just a piece of paper, it's a whisper from a forgotten world. It's a silent challenge to our understanding of the human story. It's a reminder that we might not be the first, and we might not be the last. And as you stare at the faded lines of the gazelle skin map, you can't help but wonder what else is out there, what other secrets are buried in the archives of history waiting to be found, and what else is out there that we'll never, ever find. The ghostly coastlines of a long-lost continent recede from view. The salty air and ancient scrolls of Istanbul are now replaced by the dusty, chaotic landscape of revolutionary Mexico. It's 1913, and you're walking alongside a man with a sharp tongue and an even sharper wit. He's the American writer Ambrose Bierce, a man known for his cynical and satirical prose, a man who wants to find a bore as a person who talks when you wish him to listen. Bierce is old now, well into his 70s, but his eyes still hold a mischievous glint. He is here, in the middle of a civil war, to report on the revolution, but also, as he writes in one of his last letters, because he has a hankering for a little danger and a bit of a story. He's a man who has lived a full life, and now he is on a journey that will take him into the silence of history. He's about to vanish. Mainstream historical fact is simple and stark. After writing a final letter to his daughter from Chihuahua, Mexico, in December 1913, Ambrose Bierce was never heard from again. He was in the company of the revolutionary general Pancho Villa, and he wrote about the sheer chaos and violence of the conflict. His last words, at least the ones that were recorded, were a classic bit of Bierce wit. Something along the lines of, "If you hear of my being stood up against a Mexican stone wall and shot to rags, please know that I think that's a pretty good way to depart this life. It beats being mowed down by an automobile or falling off a train." He was fully aware of the risks, and he seemingly embraced them. And then, poof, nothing. For a man who was so famous and so well documented, his disappearance is a historical black hole. There were no official reports of his death. No body was ever found, and no one ever came forward with a credible story of what happened to him. It's a mystery that has baffled biographers and historians for over a century. A man who wrote about the absurdity of life and death simply walked off the stage, leaving an empty space behind him. A quirky or fringe tidbit in this story comes from a single, unverified account. There's a persistent, albeit completely unproven rumour that Bierce didn't die in Mexico at all. Instead, he faked his death and slipped away to a quiet, anonymous life in South America. The theory goes that the cynical old writer, tired of the spotlight and the absurdity of his own fame, decided to stage his own disappearance. He had the means, the intelligence, and the motive to do so. He was a master of misdirection and deception, and the chaos of the Mexican Revolution would have been the perfect cover. The idea that he was just a bored man looking for a final private adventure is a romantic one. It also fits with his mischievous, anti-establishment personality. He was the kind of man who would have found the idea of everyone searching for him endlessly amusing. Another, slightly darker, fringe theory is that he didn't die at the hands of a firing squad, but was secretly assassinated by American agents. Bierce was a known critic of American expansionism and a fierce opponent of corporate greed. He had powerful enemies, and some of his writing could be seen as a direct threat to the financial and political interests of American companies in Mexico. The theory suggests that he was silenced, not by a Mexican revolutionary, but by his own countrymen. Of course, there is no evidence to support this, but again, in a historical vacuum, every theory, no matter how wild, starts to sound plausible. Historians still argue whether Bierce's death was a result of the Mexican Revolution or a matter of his own deliberate choice. Was he just another casualty in a brutal conflict, a civilian who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was his disappearance a final, great literary act, the ultimate story of a man who wrote about death and decided to write his own ending? The first possibility is tragic and mundane. The second is fascinating and deeply unsettling. Let's think back to the Peary Race map, the one that showed a continent that shouldn't have been there. That was a geographical mystery, a question about what we know of the physical world. Ambrose Bierce's disappearance is a different kind of mystery. It's a human one. It's a question about what we know of a single man. His story is not about a lost artifact or a lost legion, but about a lost life. And in some ways, that's a much more personal and unsettling kind of unknown. You trudge along with Bierce for a bit. The dust kicks up around your boots. The sounds of the revolution, the distant gunfire, the shouting, the confusion are all around you. Bierce just smiles a little. He's not afraid. He seems to be enjoying the chaos. He's a man who has seen too much to be scared by a little gunfire. He has a sense of fatalistic resignation that you find both terrifying and admirable. You can't help but wonder if he knows something you don't. He seems to have a secret. He seems to know that this is the end of the line, and he's okay with it. The silence that follows his last letter is not a silent scream, but a quiet, unnerving hum. It's a silence that speaks volumes. It's a silence that says, "I'm not here anymore. You'll never find me, and that's exactly how I wanted it." It's a silence that is as enigmatic as the man himself. His life was a series of questions, and his death was the ultimate answer. A great, big, unknowable void. And as you stand there, on that dusty road in Mexico, you can't help but feel a little bit of the same kind of feeling you get when you look at the Voynich manuscript. It's a feeling of being on the outside, looking in at a great and powerful secret that you will never understand. Bierce's story is a reminder that some of history's great mysteries are not about grand civilizations or ancient knowledge. They are about a single person, a single life, and a single, final choice. And in some ways, that is the most personal and profound mystery of all. The dusty road in Mexico where Ambrose Bierce took his final silent bow is far behind us. The ghost of a cynical writer fades into the evening air. Now, let's travel back in time and across the Atlantic to a quiet village in Suffolk, England in the 12th century. The year is sometime around 1150, and you are a humble farmer in the village of Woolpit. The name itself is mundane, a simple reference to the wolf traps that once dotted the area. But the story that unfolds here is anything but. One day, you and the other villagers are going about your work when something truly strange happens. Two children, a boy and a girl, emerge from one of the wolf pits. They are terrified and disoriented, and they are speaking a language that no one in the village can understand. But that's not the strangest part. Their skin is a curious, vibrant shade of green. Mainstream historical fact, in this case, is that this event was recorded by two different chroniclers in the 12th century, William of Newburgh and Ralph of Coggeshall. Their accounts, written down not long after the event, are remarkably consistent. They describe the children, their green skin, their strange language, and the fact that they refused to eat any of the food given to them, only consuming raw beans. The children were eventually taken in by Sir Richard de Calne, a local landowner who cared for them and tried to understand their story. Over time, the children's green colour faded, and they began to learn English. They explained that they came from a place called Saint, Martin's Land, a subterranean world where the sun never shone and the air was always twilight. The children claimed they were following the sound of bells and had become lost, ending up in the wolf pit. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit, one of the more fantastical elements of their story is the children's description of their home. They said their world was bathed in a sort of twilight, and that they were separated from the sun-drenched world above by a river that was both wide and bright. This description has led to some truly wild theories. Some people believe the children were not from a subterranean world at all, but from a parallel dimension. The idea that a portal opened up in the middle of a medieval field and spat out two children from another reality is, of course, a wild leap of faith. But it's a leap many have been willing to take. The fact that their story has so many unexplained details, the green skin, the strange language, the bizarre origin story, makes it ripe for all sorts of unusual explanations. Another, slightly more grounded but still very fringe, theory is that the children were not from another dimension, but from another planet. This is a very popular theory in ufology circles. The idea is that they were extraterrestrial beings who somehow crashed or were abandoned on Earth. The green skin is seen as a sign of their alien biology, and their strange language as a non-terrestrial form of communication. Of course, this theory has absolutely no evidence to support it, but it's an idea that has been entertained by many who have found the historical account to be too strange for a more rational explanation. Historians still argue whether the story of the green children is a factual historical event or an allegorical tale. The skeptics argue that the story is a clever folktale, a morality play designed to teach a lesson about the dangers of the unknown or the importance of kindness to strangers. They point to the fact that similar foundling stories exist in other cultures and that the details of the children's origin story are a bit too neat and fantastical. The historians who believe the story is true, however, point to the fact that the two chroniclers who wrote about the event were known for their careful and meticulous historical work. They weren't writing fairy tales. They were writing what they believed to be a true account of a bizarre event. Let's think about the children themselves. Imagine you are one of them. You've emerged from a dark, cool world into a bright, hot one. You're speaking a language no one understands, and they are speaking a language you don't understand. The food they offer you is strange and repulsive, and all you want are the familiar beans of your home. You're terrified and alone, and you're completely at their mercy. And then, as you slowly start to understand their world, you realise that the story you tell them sounds completely insane. A world without a sun, a path lit only by twilight. It sounds like a dream, or a fever dream. The boy, sadly, was much more sensitive to the change. He died shortly after being baptised into the Christian faith. The girl, however, thrived. She learned to speak English fluently, and she eventually worked as a servant in the house of Sir Richard de Calne. She was described as being a little bit wanton and impudent, but also, in the words of William of Newburgh, modest and well-behaved in her conduct. She eventually married a man from the nearby town of King's Lynn, and lived a seemingly normal life. So, we have a historical record of a woman who came from a subterranean world and married a man from a normal English village. It's a detail that, if it is true, is one of the most remarkable footnotes in human history. The story of the Green Children of Woolpit is a reminder that the past is not always what we expect it to be. It's not just a series of wars and political machinations. It's also filled with moments of absolute weirdness, moments that defy logic and rational explanation. The story is a challenge to our understanding of reality itself. It forces us to ask, what if the children weren't lying? What if their world really did exist? What if there are other worlds, other realities, that are just a wolf pit away? And as you look at the faded illustrations of the Green Children in an old book, you can't help but feel a shiver down your spine. It's a feeling that says, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I know it's not normal. And in a world that can sometimes feel too predictable, that's a beautiful and terrifying thought. The bizarre tale of the Green Children of Woolpit fades into the mists of medieval England. The strange, otherworldly feeling they left behind now gives way to a truly apocalyptic event. You're now in a remote, quiet part of Siberia on the morning of June 30th, 1908. It's a peaceful, ordinary day in the taiga, the vast boreal forest that covers much of northern Russia. The sun is rising and the air is still and cool. You're a local hunter, a member of the Evenk tribe, and you're going about your business when, suddenly, the world seems to come to an end. At approximately 7:17 a.m. local time, a massive explosion rips through the sky. It's not a normal sound. It's a deafening roar that can be heard for hundreds of miles. The ground trembles, the air heats up, and then a colossal wave of pressure, a shock wave, rips through the forest, flattening an estimated 80 million trees over an area of 2,150 square kilometres. The force of the blast is estimated to be 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, roughly 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It was a sky-shattering force of unimaginable power, and yet there was no impact crater. Mainstream historical fact is that something big exploded over the Tunguska River in Siberia, and it was almost certainly a meteor or a comet. The event was so remote that it took years for a scientific expedition to reach the site. The first one, led by the Russian mineralogist Leonid Kulik, didn't arrive until 1927, nearly 2 decades after the blast. Kulik and his team were expecting to find a massive crater, a gaping hole in the earth left by a falling object from space. But they didn't. They found a vast circular area of flattened trees, all pointing away from the centre of the blast, but at the very centre of the blast the trees were still standing, stripped of their branches and scorched. It was as if the object had exploded in the air a few miles above the ground before it could hit the earth. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. The lack of an impact crater has led to some truly bizarre and out-of-this-world theories. One of the most popular is the idea that the Tunguska event was not a meteor or a comet at all, but an exploding UFO. Proponents of this theory point to the fact that no fragments of a meteor or comet have ever been found at the site. They also point to the fact that the explosion occurred at an altitude, which they say is consistent with a spacecraft self-destructing in mid-air. The idea is that an alien ship, perhaps damaged and out of control, was trying to make an emergency landing and exploded before it could hit the ground. A Soviet engineer, Gennady Plekhanov, even claimed to have found traces of alien technology at the site, though his claims have never been verified. Another wild, but slightly more grounded fringe theory is that the explosion was caused by a natural but incredibly rare phenomenon, a black hole passing through the Earth. The idea is that a tiny miniature black hole entered the Earth's atmosphere, passed through a portion of Siberia, and then exited, leaving behind the massive shockwave and the scorched trees. The black hole would have been so small that it would have left no crater and no physical evidence, only the trail of its destructive passage. It's a beautifully simple and terrifyingly elegant explanation for a completely baffling event. Historians and scientists still argue whether the Tunguska event was a meteor or a comet. The distinction is an important one. A meteor is a solid, rocky object. It would have a better chance of surviving the heat and pressure of entry into the atmosphere and leaving fragments on the ground. A comet, on the other hand, is mostly ice and dust. It would be much more likely to disintegrate in the air, just like the object at Tunguska did. The comet theory is the most widely accepted one among mainstream scientists, but it doesn't fully explain the lack of any significant chemical evidence of a comet's composition at the site. It's a frustratingly incomplete answer. Let's go back to the people who actually experienced this. Imagine you are a farmer in the area. You were a witness to an event that looked and felt like the end of the world. You would have no idea what a meteor or a comet was. You would only know that the sky had exploded. For decades, the local Evenk people believed the blast was a visitation from the god Ogdi, who was angry with them for some reason. The blast in their minds was a punishment from the heavens. This is a beautiful example of how we, as humans, try to make sense of the incomprehensible. When we can't find a rational explanation, we turn to the spiritual or the magical. We create a story that can contain the horror of the event. Think back to the Taos hum, that persistent low-frequency buzz. That was a mystery of a different kind, a silent personal mystery that drove people crazy. The Tunguska event was loud, violent and public. It was a mystery that announced itself with a deafening roar and a blast of pure, unadulterated power. And yet, for all its noise and fury, it is still just as enigmatic as the hum. Both events, in their own way, are a testament to our own ignorance. They are reminders that no matter how much we think we know about the universe, there are still things that can happen that we just can't explain. The Tunguska event is not just a scientific puzzle, it's a profound historical mystery. It happened at a pivotal time in world history just before World War I. If it had happened just a few hours later, the Earth's rotation would have placed a major city like St. Petersburg or London directly under the blast. The course of human history would have been forever altered. A silent, empty forest was destroyed instead of a bustling city. It's a chilling thought, a cosmic near-miss that we were completely unaware of at the time, and as you stand at the epicenter of the blast in that quiet, eerie forest, you can't help but feel a sense of unease. There are no fragments of metal or rock, no pieces of a spaceship, no evidence of a black hole. There is only a field of flattened, silent trees all pointing away from a hole in the sky. It is a monument to an event that we can't fully explain. It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound and terrifying events in history leave behind the least amount of evidence, and in a strange way that's what makes them so powerful. They're a kind of historical ghost, a haunting silence in a world full of noise. The silent, flattened trees of Tunguska fade into a memory, replaced by the cool, dark waters of the Baltic Sea. The eerie quiet of a forest destroyed by an invisible force is now superseded by the deep, echoing silence of the ocean floor. You're in a submersible, somewhere between Sweden and Finland, on a mission to hunt for treasure and old shipwrecks. The year is 2011, and the team on board is led by a Swedish oceanographer named Peter Lindberg. The sonar pings are a constant, comforting rhythm, mapping the seafloor below you, and then a new signal appears on the screen. It's not a shipwreck, it's not a rock formation, It's something else entirely. The image that appears on your sonar screen is of a massive circular object, approximately 60 metres, 200 feet in diameter, resting on the seabed. It looks like a giant, perfectly round disk, a bizarre, symmetrical anomaly that has no natural geological explanation. It's so strange, so out of place, that the team immediately dubs it the Baltic Sea Anomaly. The image is a shock. The seabed is a messy, chaotic place, filled with rocks, silt, and the remains of ships. But this object is so clean, so organised, that it defies all logic. Mainstream historical fact in this case is that a group of Swedish oceanographers discovered a large circular object on the seabed of the Baltic Sea in 2011. They have released the sonar images and have been to the site. They have confirmed that the object is not a shipwreck, not a natural rock formation, and that it has some very unusual features. The object has a long, perfectly straight track leading up to it, as if it slid or was dragged across the seabed. It also has what appears to be a staircase-like formation on the side, and a number of what look like small symmetrical pillars. The object is a genuine documented mystery. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. The resemblance of the Baltic Sea Anomaly to the fictional Millennium Falcon from Star Wars is just too uncanny to ignore. The object's circular shape, its two-pronged protrusion, and the long scraped path behind it have led to a deluge of online speculation. Is it a submerged UFO? Is it an ancient alien spacecraft that crashed into the ocean and has been sitting there, silent and dormant, for thousands of years? The idea is as wild as it is captivating. People have photoshopped the object to look more like the famous spaceship, and the image has become a pop culture phenomenon. The fact that the object looks so much like something from a movie just adds to its bizarre appeal. Another, slightly more plausible, but still very fringe, theory is that the object is a forgotten relic from the Cold War. The Baltic Sea was a hotbed of activity for both the Soviet and Western navies, and there were rumours of secret experimental technology being tested in the area. Could the anomaly be a crashed Soviet submersible, or some kind of secret weapon that was lost during a test? The idea is not entirely far-fetched, but there has been no official statement from any government, and the object itself doesn't resemble any known military technology from that era. Historians and geologists still argue whether the anomaly is a natural geological formation or a man-made object. The geological explanation is the most straightforward, but it has some serious problems. A natural rock formation, called a glacial erratic, could have been left behind by a melting glacier, but glacial erratics are rarely, if ever, perfectly circular. They are also not known to leave long, straight tracks on the seafloor behind them. The skeptics also argue that the sonar images are not as clear as they seem, and that the perfectly round shape is just an optical illusion created by the limitations of the sonar technology. The defenders of the object's strangeness, however, point to the fact that the divers who have been to the site have seen the object with their own eyes. They have described it as a smooth, almost perfectly round disc, and they have noted the bizarre features that are not visible in the sonar images. Let's imagine you are one of the divers who went to the site. The water is cold and dark and the visibility is poor. As you descend, the object slowly comes into view. It is not an optical illusion. It is a massive symmetrical disc resting on the seabed. You can't tell what it's made of, it's covered in a layer of silt and mud, but you can see the strange staircase-like formation on the side, and you can see the perfectly straight track leading up to it. It's a surreal experience. You're looking at something that, by all accounts, should not exist, and in that moment, you realise that the world is a much stranger place than you ever thought possible. Remember the lost Roman legion of Cari? They vanished into the sands of Central Asia. Their story is about an absence, a historical hole. The Baltic Sea anomaly is the opposite. It is a presence, a solid, tangible object that defies explanation. It is a historical and geological anomaly, a piece of the puzzle that just doesn't fit. And in that way, it's a much more unsettling kind of mystery. An absence can be explained by a simple disappearance, but a presence requires a much more complicated explanation. The Baltic Sea anomaly is a beautiful example of a modern mystery. It's not something from 1,000 years ago, lost to the sands of time. It's something that happened in our lifetime, a few years ago. It's a reminder that even in our modern, technologically advanced world, there are still things that can happen that we just can't explain. It's a reminder that the world is still full of secrets, and some of them are waiting for us at the bottom of the ocean. And as you look at the sonar image of the object, you can't help but wonder, what if it is a UFO? What if it's a relic of a long-lost civilization that was far more advanced than our own? What if it's a warning from the past or a message from the future? The truth is, we don't know. We only have the image, the silence of the ocean, and the mystery. And in a world that can sometimes feel too predictable, that's a beautiful and terrifying thought. The mysterious disc-shaped anomaly in the Baltic Sea now rests, silent and cold, at the bottom of our minds. We leave the depths of the ocean and travel back in time, all the way to the island of Crete a few thousand years ago. It's 1908, and you are an Italian archaeologist named Luigi Pernier, painstakingly excavating the Minoan palace of Phaistos. The Minoan civilization is a beautiful, enigmatic puzzle. They were a people who built stunning palaces, worshipped bulls, and left behind a script we still can't decipher. You're working in a storeroom beneath the palace, sifting through the layers of history, when you come across something truly remarkable. It's a small, flat terracotta disc, about 15 centimetres, 6 inches, in diameter, and it's covered in symbols, stamped into the clay in a spiral pattern, a swirling vortex of strange pictograms. This is the Phaistos disc, and it is one of the most stubborn mysteries in all of archaeology. Mainstream historical fact is that the Phaistos disc is a genuine artefact from the Minoan civilization, dating back to the Middle or Late Minoan Bronze Age, around 1700 BC. The disc is made of fired clay, and the symbols on it were not carved by hand, but were stamped using a set of 45 different seals. This is a crucial detail. It means the disc was not a one-off curiosity, but a mass-produced document, or at least a document that was intended to be replicated. It's the world's first known example of printing with movable type, centuries before the invention of the Gutenberg press. And yet, for all its revolutionary implications, no one knows what it says. The symbols are unlike any other known writing system from the Minoan period, including Linear A and Linear B, which have both been partially or fully deciphered. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. Some people believe the Phaistos disc is not a form of writing at all, but a form of music. They argue that the symbols are not words but musical notes, and that the disc is a kind of ancient sheet music, a beautiful melody preserved on a clay record. The idea is that the symbols represent pitches, rhythms and harmonies, and that the spiral pattern is a guide for the musician. This theory, of course, has absolutely no evidence to support it, but it's a beautiful and romantic idea. Imagine a Minoan musician, centuries ago, holding the disc in their hands, reading the swirling notes, and creating a beautiful, haunting melody. It would be a music that has been silent for thousands of years, a song that is waiting to be heard. Another, more grounded but still very fringe theory, is that the disc is not from Crete at all, but was brought there from a different unknown civilization. This theory is supported by the fact that the symbols on the disc are so unique. They have no parallel in any other known writing system from the ancient world. Could the disc be an artifact of a lost civilization, a stray piece of a global network of trade and culture that we've completely forgotten about? The Piri Reis map, with its global knowledge, and the Phaistos disc, with its unique writing system, seem to whisper a similar story. That the ancient world was much more complex and interconnected place than we give it credit for. Historians and linguists still argue whether the disc is a form of writing or a forgery. The forgery theory is a compelling one. The disc was discovered in a very clean, pristine condition, and it was found in a storeroom, not in a burial site or a place of worship. Could it be that the archaeologist Luigi Pernier, a man known for his meticulous work, was also a genius forger? The idea is that he created the disc to make a name for himself, and that the symbols are just a series of random pictograms that have no meaning. But the defenders of the disc's authenticity point to the fact that the disc was found with another genuine Minoan artifact, a tablet with a Linear A inscription. They also point to the sheer complexity of the symbols and the fact that they were created with stamps, not by hand. A forger would have had to create 45 different stamps, a painstaking and time-consuming process. It seems like a lot of work for a simple hoax. Let's imagine you are an ancient Minoan scholar, and you are handed the Phaistos disc. You are an expert in Linear A and Linear B, and you're used to reading the inscriptions on the walls of palaces and on clay tablets. But this is something completely different. The symbols are foreign. They are alien. You recognise a few of them. A man, a fish, a bird, but they are arranged in a way that makes no sense. The spiral pattern is mesmerising, and you can't help but feel a sense of unease. You're looking at a document from your own culture, but it feels like it's from a completely different world. This is the central mystery of the Phaistos disc. It's not just a puzzle, it's a challenge. It's a silent taunt from the past. It's a document that, by all accounts, should be decipherable, but it's not. It's a reminder that even the most seemingly simple and straightforward artifacts can contain a profound and uncrackable secret. The disc is a beautiful, frustrating, and utterly silent object. It's a time capsule that we have no key to. Think back to the Voynich manuscript, that strange book with its undecipherable language and its bizarre illustrations. That was a mystery of a different kind. A paper mystery. A book that could be a hoax or a genuine relic. The Phaistos disc is a solid, tangible object, a piece of clay that has been sitting in a storeroom for thousands of years. It's a much more grounded and unsettling kind of mystery. It is a reminder that the past is not always what we think it is, and that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not about what happened, but about what was said. And as you look at the disc, with its swirling symbols, you can't help but wonder, what if it's a prayer? What if it's a prophecy? What if it's a message to the future? A message to us? A message that we are just too blind to see? The truth is, we don't know. We only have the disc, the silence of the past, and the mystery. And in a world that can sometimes feel too predictable, that's a beautiful and terrifying thought. The indecipherable symbols of the Phaistos disc recede into the ancient past. The warm sun-baked clay of Crete is now replaced by the chilling snow-covered landscape of Devon, England. The year's 1855, and it's a cold, silent night. You're a farmer in the quiet village of Lympstone, tucked away on the coast. You've just finished your dinner and are getting ready to turn in when a gentle snow begins to fall. It's a perfect, peaceful night, the kind of night where the world feels still and silent. And then, in the morning, the world is changed. The snow that fell during the night has covered the ground in a smooth, pristine blanket. But as you look out your window, you see something that makes your blood run cold. A set of strange, cloven-hoofed footprints, like those of a goat or a cloven-hoofed beast, are stamped into the snow. They are perfectly spaced one after another in a straight line, and they go on for miles. Mainstream historical fact is that on the morning of February 8th, 1855, residents of Devon, England, woke up to find a bizarre and inexplicable set of footprints in the snow. The footprints, which looked like cloven hooves, stretched for over 100 miles, crossing a wide variety of terrain, including rivers, walls, and even the tops of houses. They were all in a straight line, as if the creature that made them was walking on a single invisible wire. The event was documented in local newspapers and journals, and it caused a sensation. The locals were terrified, and they believed the footprints were a sign of the devil himself, hence the name, the Devil's Footprints of Devon. The footprints were so strange, so persistent, and so inexplicable that they were seen as a sign of something truly unnatural. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. One of the more fantastical elements of the story is the fact that the footprints were able to cross a river. The River Exe, which flows through the area, was frozen over at the time, but the footprints were found on both sides of the river, as if the creature had simply walked across the water. This detail has led to some truly bizarre theories. Some people believe the creature was not an animal at all, but a form of energy or a ghost. The idea is that the footprints were not footprints in the conventional sense, but a kind of energy transfer, a physical manifestation of a being that had no physical form. This theory, of course, has no evidence to support it, but it speaks to the sheer strangeness of the event. When a physical phenomenon defies the laws of physics, people start looking for explanations that are outside of the physical world. Another, slightly more plausible, but still very fringe theory, is that the footprints were a hoax. The idea is that a group of pranksters, or a single, very dedicated prankster, went around the county with a set of fake hooves, carefully stamping the snow to create the illusion of a single, continuous line. The sheer length of the trail, and the difficulty of navigating such varied terrain in a single night, makes this theory seem almost as far-fetched as a visit from the devil. It would have required a level of endurance and dedication that would be a feat in itself, but in the absence of a better explanation, a human cause seems more likely than a supernatural one. Historians and skeptics still argue whether the footprints were a natural phenomenon, a hoax, or a genuine mystery. The natural explanation is the most straightforward, but it has some serious problems. Some have suggested that the prints were made by a badger or a fox, but the size and shape of the prints, and their single, continuous line, don't match the gait of any known animal. The hopping mouse theory, which suggests that a small rodent was hopping along on its hind legs, is also a non-starter. The prints were simply too large and too perfectly formed to be a mouse. The skeptics also argue that the stories were exaggerated over time, and that the 100 miles was a product of local folklore. But the contemporary newspaper accounts support the idea that the footprints were indeed widespread and inexplicable. Let's imagine you are a local resident in Devon at the time. You are a superstitious person, and you believe in the devil and in demons. The sight of these footprints would have been a terrifying confirmation of your worst fears. You would see them as a sign of a dark presence in your quiet, peaceful village. You would feel a sense of dread, a sense of foreboding, that you would not be able to shake. It's a feeling that would stay with you for the rest of your life. The Devil's Footprints of Devon are not just a historical event, they are a psychological one. They are a testament to the power of belief and to the power of a single, inexplicable event to change the way we see the world. Remember the Lost Roman Legion? Their story was about an absence, a historical hole. The Devil's Footprints are the opposite. They are a presence, a physical manifestation of something that defies all explanation. They are a kind of historical ghost, a haunting silence in a world full of noise, and in that way they are a much more unsettling kind of mystery. An absence can be explained by a simple disappearance, but a presence requires a much more complicated explanation. The Devil's Footprints of Devon are a beautiful example of a mystery that is both historical and deeply personal. It's a historical puzzle, but it's also a deeply human one. It's a reminder that there are still things in this world that we don't understand, and that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not out in space or buried in ancient tombs, but right here in a small village in England, stamped in the snow. And, the most chilling thing about it all is that even as you're listening to this and thinking about it, you might be looking at a set of tracks that you just can't explain. It's a reminder that the world is still full of secrets, and some of them are waiting for us right outside our front door. The Devil's Footprints in the snow have melted away, and the terrifying shadow of an unknown beast has receded. We leave the frigid, folklore-haunted landscape of Devon and travel to the sun-baked, wide-open spaces of Western Australia. The year's 1932, and the Great Depression is in full swing. Farmers are struggling, and the government is trying to find a way to help. They decide to send in the military, but not to fight a human enemy. They're here to fight a very different kind of adversary. A massive army of emus. This is the Great Emu War, a historical event that sounds so absurd that it's often mistaken for a joke. It is, however, a completely real and utterly baffling moment in military history. Mainstream historical fact is that in 1932, the Australian military was deployed to combat a population of approximately 20,000 emus that were causing havoc in the Campion district of Western Australia. The emus, displaced by a change in their migratory patterns and attracted to the newly cultivated farmlands, were destroying crops and wreaking havoc on the struggling farms. The government, under pressure from the farmers, decided to send in a contingent of soldiers armed with Lewis automatic machine guns. The operation was led by Major G.P.W. Meredith, and the goal was simple: to cull the emu population and save the wheat crops. The entire event was documented by a movie camera, and the footage shows a bizarre and utterly ridiculous scene. Soldiers chasing giant flightless birds across the Australian outback. The war lasted for a little over a month, and it was an absolute and total failure for the Australian military. The emus, it turns out, were not an easy enemy to defeat. They were incredibly fast, reaching speeds of up to 30 miles per hour, and they were surprisingly resilient. The Lewis machine guns, which were designed to take down human soldiers, were largely ineffective against the emu's tough hides and erratic movements. The birds were also masters of guerrilla warfare, splitting into smaller groups when they were attacked and then scattering into the bush. The soldiers, bogged down by the heat and the futility of their mission, eventually retreated in defeat. The war was a complete embarrassment for the Australian military, and it became a source of national and international ridicule, now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. One of the more amusing and bizarre details of the story is the fact that the emus, in a strange twist of evolutionary fate, seem to be almost intelligent in their tactics. Major Meredith, in his official reports, noted that the emus were displaying signs of an organised enemy. He even claimed that they had developed a form of bushcraft, and that a single leader would stand watch while the others ate. This is, of course, a deeply anthropomorphic way of looking at it, but it speaks to the frustration of the soldiers. They were not fighting a mindless horde of birds, they were fighting a determined and surprisingly clever enemy. The idea that a bunch of birds outsmarted a human military is just too good to be true, but in this case, it was. Another, slightly more philosophical but still very fringe, theory is that the Emu War was not a military blunder at all but a form of psychological warfare. The idea is that the Australian government, under pressure from a population that was struggling with the Great Depression, wanted to show the people that they were taking action, even if the action was completely absurd. The war was, in a strange way, a form of public theatre, a way to distract the people from their economic woes by giving them a ridiculous spectacle to laugh at. It's a dark and cynical theory, but it fits with the general mood of the time. The idea that a government would use a war with a bunch of birds to distract its people from a financial crisis is a deeply unsettling thought. Historians still argue whether the war was a genuine military operation, or a series of unfortunate events that spiralled out of control. The skeptics argue that the war was never meant to be a serious military engagement. They point to the fact that Major Meredith's contingent was small, and the mission was poorly planned. They argue that the war was a photo op that went horribly wrong, a public relations stunt that backfired in a spectacular way. The defenders of the war's absurdity, however, point to the fact that the Australian government authorised the use of military equipment and personnel to cull a population of birds. They argue that no matter how poorly planned or executed, it was still a genuine military operation. Let's imagine you are one of the soldiers who was there. You've just returned from the battlefields of World War I, and you've seen the horrors of trench warfare. And now you're in the middle of a desert, chasing a bunch of giant birds with a machine gun. It would be a surreal and deeply humiliating experience. You would feel a sense of utter futility, a sense of, what in the world am I doing here? The war was not a tragedy, but it was a farce. And in a strange way, a farce can be just as unsettling as a tragedy. It's a reminder that sometimes the most serious and solemn institutions of our society can be reduced to a joke by a simple, absurd twist of fate. The Great Emu War is a beautiful example of a mystery that is not about an unknown past, but about a known one. It's not about a lost civilization or a vanished person. It's about a series of events that actually happened, and yet they are so absurd and so inexplicable that they defy all logic. It's a reminder that history is not just a series of solemn and important events. It's also full of moments of absolute weirdness, moments that defy all reason and logic. And in a world that can sometimes feel too predictable, that's a beautiful and terrifying thought. It's a moment in history that you can't help but laugh at, but you also can't help but wonder, what in the world were they thinking? And as you look at the grainy black and white footage of the soldiers chasing the emus, you can't help but feel a sense of unease. It's a feeling that says, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I know it's not normal. It's a reminder that the world is a much stranger place than we ever thought possible. And in some ways, that's the most profound mystery of all. The Great Emu War has retreated into the absurd annals of history, a bizarre feathered footnote. The hot, dusty plains of Australia are replaced by the unsettling, rain-slicked streets of Los Angeles. It's 2013, and you're checking into a downtown hotel, the Cecil Hotel. This is not a normal hotel. It has a dark and troubled past, a history steeped in murder, suicide, and serial killers. It's a place where the air feels thick with a kind of low-grade dread. A place where the shadows seem to hold their breath. You're here to investigate a case that, for all its modern-day technology and surveillance, remains as stubbornly inexplicable as any of the ancient mysteries we've discussed. This is the case of the unexplained death of Elisa Lam. Mainstream historical fact is that Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old Canadian student, was visiting Los Angeles on a solo trip. On January 31st, 2013, she vanished. The last known footage of her was from a hotel surveillance camera in the elevator. The footage, which has become a viral and deeply unsettling piece of internet lore, shows her behaving erratically. She gets into the elevator, presses several buttons, and then seems to be hiding from someone or something. She looks out of the elevator, her body language a mix of fear and confusion. She gesticulates wildly, her arms flailing. She steps out of the elevator, and then, after a few more moments of strange behaviour, she disappears from the camera's view. She was not seen or heard from again until her body was found 19 days later. Her body was discovered by a maintenance worker in one of the hotel's large water tanks on the roof. The discovery was prompted by guest complaints about low water pressure, and the water having a strange taste and a dark colour. The finding of the body itself was baffling. The tanks were difficult to access. They were located on the roof, which was locked and required a key and an alarm code. The tanks themselves were also difficult to get into. They were tall, with no ladder, and the hatches were heavy and almost impossible to open from the inside. The question that has baffled investigators and the public for years is simple. How did she get into the tank? Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. The unsettling video of Elisa Lam in the elevator has been the subject of countless hours of analysis and speculation. The video itself seems to show her having a conversation with an unseen person, and some have speculated that she was not alone. They point to the fact that she seems to be cowering and hiding, as if someone is chasing her. The idea is that she was being hunted by a killer who was staying at the hotel, and that her strange behaviour was a sign of her fear. This theory, of course, has never been proven, and the police have stated that they found no evidence of foul play. But the video is so strange, so unnerving, that it's hard to shake the feeling that she was not alone. Another, more grounded, but still very fringe theory, is that her death was a result of a mental health episode. Elisa Lam had a documented history of bipolar disorder, and she was on medication. It's possible that she had an episode and that her strange behaviour in the elevator was a result of a psychotic break. The idea is that in her altered state of mind, she somehow managed to access the roof and get into the water tank. This theory is plausible, but it doesn't fully explain all the details. How did she get to the roof? And how did she manage to open the heavy hatch on the tank? It seems like an almost impossible feat for a single person, let alone a person in a psychotic state. The questions remain unanswered. Historians and true crime enthusiasts still argue whether her death was an accident, a suicide, or a murder. The accident theory is the most widely accepted one among law enforcement officials. They believe that she somehow managed to get on the roof, perhaps through a fire escape, and that she somehow managed to get into the tank, perhaps as a way to hide from an imagined threat. The suicide theory is also a possibility, but it seems unlikely that she would choose such a difficult and convoluted way to end her life. The murder theory, while popular with the public, has no evidence to support it. The police have stated that they found no signs of a struggle on her body, and the autopsy report found no evidence of foul play. The medical examiner ruled her death an accident, citing drowning as the cause of death. But the public and many a skeptic are not convinced. Let's imagine you're a guest at the Cecil Hotel and you're drinking the water. You notice that it has a strange taste and a dark colour. You call the front desk and a maintenance worker comes to your room. He says that they have a problem with the water pressure and that they are looking into it. A few days later you learn that the problem was caused by a dead body in the water tank. You would feel a sense of utter horror and disgust. But you would also feel a sense of unease. You would wonder how a person could get into a tank on the roof of a locked building. You would wonder if you were safe. The case of Elisa Lam is not just a historical event, it's a psychological one. It's a testament to the power of the unknown. It's a reminder that even in our modern, technologically advanced world, there are still things that can happen that we just can't explain. Remember the Devil's Footprints of Devon? They were a physical manifestation of a mystery. The case of Elisa Lam is the opposite. It is a modern mystery, a series of events that are so well documented, so well filmed, and yet they still don't make sense. It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not about a lost civilization or a vanished person. They're about a single person, a single life, and a single final choice. And in some ways, that is the most personal and profound mystery of all. And as you look at the grainy video of Elisa Lam in the elevator, you can't help but feel a sense of unease. It's a feeling that says, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I know it's not normal. It's a reminder that the world is a much stranger place than we ever thought possible. And in some ways, that's the most profound mystery of all. Her case is a modern ghost story, a haunting reminder that even with all our cameras and all our technology, some questions will simply never have an answer. The unsettling modern ghost story of Elisa Lam's final moments fades, the mystery of her death still hanging in the air. Let's now travel back, not just decades, but over 2 millennia, to the year 1900. You're a sponge diver off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, a place where the sea holds its secrets close. You've just discovered a Roman shipwreck, a vessel that went down in the 1st century BC, its hull a tomb of ancient treasures, marble statues, bronze figures, and a few mysterious lumps of corroded bronze. You and your fellow divers bring the lumps to the surface, and they are so caked in grime and sea life that they are almost unrecognisable. You have no idea that you have just found one of the most incredible and perplexing artefacts in all of human history, the Antikythera mechanism. Mainstream historical fact is that the Antikythera mechanism is a hand-powered ancient Greek orrery, a device used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses for calendar and astrological purposes. It's a box of 82 fragments of bronze gears, dials and plates, and it is a marvel of ancient engineering. The gears, some as small as a modern wristwatch, are incredibly complex and precise, with a sophistication that wasn't seen again in Europe for another 1,000 years. The device was a kind of ancient analogue computer, a clockwork machine that could track the movements of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets of the time. It was a tool of immense scientific and astronomical knowledge. The sheer complexity of the device, and the fact that it was found in a shipwreck from the 1st century BC, is a historical anomaly. The discovery of this device completely upended our understanding of ancient Greek technology. For centuries, we thought the Greeks were masters of philosophy, mathematics, and architecture, but we didn't think they had the technological know-how to build something like this. The mechanism shows a level of gear cutting, differential gearing, and astronomical knowledge that we previously believed was developed by Islamic and European scholars in the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance. It's a piece of technology that shouldn't exist. It's like finding an iPhone in a dinosaur fossil. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit, one of the more fantastical elements of the story is the idea that the Antikythera mechanism was not built by human hands at all, but was given to the Greeks by a more advanced non-human civilization. The idea is that the knowledge required to build something this complex was so far beyond the scope of ancient Greek technology that it must have come from an outside source. Some people have even suggested that the device was a part of a larger, more complex machine, a piece of an alien spacecraft that was left behind after a visit to Earth. This theory, of course, is a wild leap of faith, but it speaks to the frustration the device has caused. When a historical artifact defies all rational explanation, people start looking for explanations that are outside of the historical record. Another, more grounded, but still very fringe theory, is that the mechanism was not a one-off curiosity, but a part of a much larger and now lost technological tradition. The idea is that the Greeks had a thriving community of engineers and inventors who were building complex machines, but that their knowledge was lost to time. The mechanism is a kind of historical ghost, a remnant of a technological golden age that we've completely forgotten about. The Piri Reis map, with its global knowledge, and the Antikythera mechanism with its advanced technology, seem to whisper a similar story, that the ancient world was a much more complex and interconnected place than we give it credit for. Historians and engineers still argue whether the mechanism was used for practical or purely theoretical purposes. Was it a tool used by sailors to navigate the seas? Or was it a kind of beautiful philosophical toy, a way for the Greeks to model the cosmos and understand the heavens? The truth is, we don't know. We only have the fragments, the silent pieces of a machine that once moved with the grace and precision of a god. The device is a beautiful, frustrating, and utterly silent object. It's a time capsule that we have no key to. Let's imagine you're an ancient Greek scholar, and you are handed the Antikythera mechanism. You're an expert in philosophy and mathematics, and you're used to reading the inscriptions on the walls of palaces and on clay tablets. But this is something completely different. It's a machine. You can turn the crank, and the gears will move, and the dials will show you the future. It's a magical object, a thing of pure wonder. You would have no idea how it was built, and you would be filled with a sense of awe and reverence. you would be looking at a piece of technology that was so far beyond your comprehension that you would think it was a gift from the gods. The Antikythera mechanism is a beautiful example of a mystery that is both historical and deeply personal. It's a historical puzzle, but it's also a deeply human one. It's a reminder that there are still things in this world that we don't understand, and that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not out in space or buried in ancient tombs, but right here in a small box of gears and dials. It's a reminder that the world is a much stranger place than we ever thought possible. And as you look at the faded bronze gears, you can't help but feel a sense of unease. It's a feeling that says, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I know it's not normal. It's a reminder that the world is a much stranger place than we ever thought possible. And in some ways, that's the most profound mystery of all. The mechanism is a time machine that works in reverse. It's a ghost from the future, a whisper from a technological golden age that we've completely forgotten about. It's a reminder that the past is not a foreign country. It is a place that is just as strange and beautiful and unknowable as the future. The Antikythera mechanism, a marvel of ancient engineering, now rests in the silent depths of our memory. Its complex gears and dials have faded, replaced by a different kind of mystery, one that is as beautiful and as baffling as the mechanism itself. We're now in the lush, humid jungles of Costa Rica, specifically the Diquis Delta, a fertile river valley that has been a home to people for thousands of years. It's the 1930s, and you're a worker for the United Fruit Company, clearing land for a banana plantation. Your machete cuts through the thick foliage, and as the trees fall, you begin to see them. Perfectly round stone spheres, of all sizes, from a few centimetres to over 2 metres in diameter, scattered across the landscape. They are smooth and polished, and they look like they were made by a master craftsman. But you know that's impossible. They're just rocks, right? But as you look at them, you can't help but feel a sense of unease. They are too perfect, too symmetrical to be natural. This is the mystery of the stone spheres of Costa Rica. Mainstream historical fact is that the stone spheres, known locally as Las Bolas, were created by the pre-Columbian Dique culture, which thrived in the area from about 700 AD to 1530 AD. The spheres are made from a hard volcanic rock called granodiorite, and they are so perfectly spherical that they have baffled archaeologists for decades. The stones were not just found in the jungle, they were also found in burial sites and in the centre of ancient settlements. They seem to have been a part of the Diquis culture, but no one knows what their purpose was. Were they a form of art? Were they a kind of astronomical calendar? Were they used for some kind of ceremony? We simply don't know. The Diquis people left no written records, and their civilization disappeared after the Spanish conquest, so their secrets have been lost to the sands of time. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. The sheer perfection of the spheres has led to some truly outlandish theories. Some people believe the spheres are not of human origin at all, but were created by a non-human intelligence, an ancient alien civilization that used them as a kind of navigational tool or a way to mark a sacred site. The idea is that the spheres are so perfect, so symmetrical, that they could not have been created by a primitive culture using primitive tools. They must have been created by a civilization that had a level of technology that was far beyond the Diquis people. This theory, of course, has no evidence to support it, but it speaks to the frustration the spheres have caused. When a historical artifact defies all rational explanation, people start looking for explanations that are outside of the historical record. Another, more grounded but still very fringe theory, is that the spheres are not just a collection of random objects, but a part of a larger, now lost, grid system. The idea is that the Diquis people use the spheres as a form of a map, a way to mark out the stars or the sacred places in the jungle. The idea is that the spheres are not just a form of art, but a form of ancient knowledge, a kind of stone computer that was used to track the movements of the heavens. This theory is supported by the fact that the spheres are often found in a cluster, and that they seem to be arranged in a way that suggests a pattern, but without a key, we can't be sure. Historians and archaeologists still argue whether the spheres were a form of art or a form of scientific or ritualistic knowledge. The art theory is the most straightforward one. The Diquis people were master craftsmen, and they created beautiful pottery, jewellery, and stone carvings. It's possible that the spheres were just a form of sculpture, a way for the Diquis people to express their love of symmetry and beauty. This scientific theory, however, is much more intriguing. The idea that a pre-Columbian culture, which we tend to think of as primitive, had a level of astronomical knowledge that was so advanced that they could use a series of stone spheres to track the movements of the heavens is a mind-bending one. It forces us to confront our own assumptions about history and about the past. Let's imagine you are a Dickies craftsman and you are creating one of the spheres. You have no metal tools. You have no power saws. You only have a hammer and a chisel and a lot of patience. You spend months, maybe years, carving a single sphere, making sure that every angle is perfect, that every curve is smooth, that the sphere is as close to a perfect circle as humanly possible. The work would be a form of meditation, a way to connect with the gods and with the earth. You would be creating not just a piece of art, but a work of pure, unadulterated passion. You would be a master of your craft, and you would be creating something that was meant to last forever. Remember the Phaistos disc. That was a mystery of a different kind, a silent, unreadable text. The stone spheres are a silent, unreadable form of art. They are a monument to a culture that has been lost to time, a monument that we can touch and feel, but we can't understand. And in that way, they are a much more unsettling kind of mystery. A text can be deciphered, a language can be learned. But a piece of art is something that we can only feel, and we can only guess at its meaning. The stone spheres are a beautiful example of a mystery that is both historical and deeply personal. It's a historical puzzle, but it's also a deeply human one. It's a reminder that there are still things in this world that we don't understand, and that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not about a lost civilization or a vanished person. They are about a single object, a single piece of stone, and a single, unanswerable question. And as you look at the perfectly round stone sphere, you can't help but feel a sense of awe and a sense of unease. It's a feeling that says, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I know it's not normal. It's a reminder that the world is a much stranger place than we ever thought possible. And in some ways, that's the most profound mystery of all. The spheres are a beautiful, silent, and utterly unknowable monument to a mind we will never know. The perfect stone spheres of Costa Rica, a silent testament to a forgotten culture, now fade from our view. The humid jungle air is replaced by the salty, unforgiving winds of the North Carolina coast. It's the late 16th century, and you're an English settler, part of a new expedition to the New World. You've been sent by Sir Walter Raleigh to establish a colony on Roanoke Island. The year is 1587, and you're full of hope and trepidation. This is the third attempt to establish a colony here, and the first two failed. The first was a military expedition that ended in disaster. The second was an attempt to establish a colony that was abandoned after a brutal winter. But this time, you have women and children with you. You have a governor, John White, who is a meticulous artist and a careful leader. And you have a sense of purpose. You are here to build a new life, a new England, in the wilderness. Mainstream historical fact is that the Roanoke colony was established in 1587, with 115 settlers, including Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the New World. The colony seemed to be doing well, but after a few months the supplies began to run low. Governor John White, at the urging of the colonists, returned to England to get more supplies. He left his daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter, Virginia Dare, behind. He promised to return in a few months, but the return was delayed by the war between England and Spain and the Spanish Armada, a naval conflict that made it impossible for him to get a ship. When he finally returned to the colony in 1590, 3 years later, he found it completely abandoned. There were no bodies, no signs of a struggle, and no indication of what had happened to the colonists. There was only one word carved into a fence post: Croatoan. And the letters CRO carved into a tree nearby. The Roanoke colony had simply vanished. The mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke is one of the most enduring and tragic in American history. It's a mystery that has baffled historians for centuries. What happened to the colonists? Did they move to a nearby island? Did they get wiped out by a local tribe? Did they try to sail back to England and get lost at sea? No one knows. The fact that the colonists were so well documented and that they had a plan in place for what to do if they had to leave makes their disappearance all the more baffling. The word Croatoan was the name of a nearby island and the tribe that lived there. The colonists had a prearranged plan to carve a cross if they were leaving under duress, but no cross was found. This suggested that the colonists had not been attacked but had moved to the island of Croatoan. But when John White went to the island, he found no sign of them. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. One of the more fantastical elements of the story is the idea that the colonists didn't just move to Croatoan, but that they were absorbed into the local tribe. The idea is that the colonists, faced with starvation and a brutal winter, decided to live with the friendly Croatoan tribe. The idea is that the colonists intermarried with the tribe, and that their descendants are still living in the area today. The Lumbee tribe of North Carolina, a Native American tribe that lives in the area, has a legend that they are the descendants of the lost colonists. They have a number of European surnames, and they have a number of European physical features. This theory, of course, has no evidence to support it, but it speaks to the frustration the mystery has caused. The idea that a lost colony could simply be absorbed into a local tribe is a romantic and tragic one. Another, slightly more grounded but still very fringe theory is that the colonists didn't move to Croatoan but were captured by a Spanish ship and taken as slaves. The idea is that a Spanish vessel patrolling the coast came across the colony and decided to take the colonists as prisoners. This theory is supported by the fact that the Spanish were a fierce rival of the English, and that they would have had a motive to destroy the colony. But there is no historical record of a Spanish ship finding the colony or taking the colonists as prisoners, and it doesn't explain the word Croatoan carved into the fence post. Historians and archaeologists still argue whether the colony was a victim of the Spanish, a victim of the local tribes, or a victim of their own circumstances. The local tribe theory is the most straightforward. The colonists were in a new and hostile environment, and they were a small group. It's possible that they got into a conflict with a local tribe and were wiped out. But the lack of any bodies or any signs of a struggle makes this theory seem unlikely. The starvation theory is also a possibility. The colonists may have starved to death, and their bodies may have been buried by the elements. But the lack of any signs of a struggle or any indication of their fate is still a puzzle. Let's imagine you are one of the colonists and you are left on the island. You're waiting for John White to return. The days turn into weeks, and the weeks turn into months. The supplies are running low, the winter is approaching. You're looking out at the sea, hoping to see a ship on the horizon, but there's nothing. You are a small group, and you are surrounded by a wilderness that is both beautiful and terrifying. You have a choice. You can stay and hope for the best, or you can try to survive by moving to a nearby island. What would you do? You would probably choose to move to the nearby island, the island of the friendly Croatoan tribe, the place that you had already agreed on with Governor White, and then you would simply vanish. Remember the lost Roman legion? Their story was about a group of people who simply disappeared from the historical record. The lost colony of Roanoke is a similar mystery, but it's a much more personal one. It's not about a group of soldiers, but about a group of families, with women and children. It's about a group of people who had a dream of a new life, a new England, and a new world, and that dream simply vanished. The lost colony of Roanoke is a beautiful example of a mystery that is both historical and deeply personal. It's a historical puzzle, but it's also a deeply human one. It's a reminder that there are still things in this world that we don't understand, and that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not about a lost civilization or a vanished person. They're about a single group of people, a single, unanswerable question. And as you look at the picture of the colony, you can't help but feel a sense of unease. It's a feeling that says, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I know it's not normal. It's a reminder that the world is a much stranger place than we ever thought possible. And in some ways, that's the most profound mystery of all. The vanished colonists of Roanoke Island now exist only as a ghost story, a tragic silence on the American coastline. Let's leave the human-sized mysteries behind and travel to a different kind of quiet, one that is punctuated by an otherworldly phenomenon. You're now in the Hessdalen Valley in central Norway, a place of stunning natural beauty with its steep hills, dense pine forests, and a peaceful, silent atmosphere. It's the late 1980s, and you're a local resident, a farmer or a forester, and you're accustomed to the quiet rhythms of life here. But for the last few years, the quiet has been broken by a strange and beautiful phenomenon, the Hessdalen Lights. Mainstream historical fact is that the Hessdalen Lights are an ongoing, unexplained phenomenon of silent, unexplained lights that appear in the sky above the Hessdalen Valley. They have been observed by thousands of people, including scientists, for decades. The lights are not a trick of the eye or a weather balloon. They're a real physical phenomenon. They're usually bright yellow or white balls of light that float in the air, sometimes for hours at a time. They can move slowly or they can dart around at incredible speeds. They can appear in a variety of shapes and sizes, and they can appear at any time of day or night. The lights are a genuine, well-documented mystery. Scientists have been studying the lights for years, and they have no single, conclusive explanation for them. The most popular mainstream theories are that the lights are a form of atmospheric plasma, a kind of ionized gas that is created by a natural phenomenon. The valley, with its unique geology and its high concentration of various metals and minerals, is a kind of natural generator, creating a kind of atmospheric battery that creates the lights. The theory is plausible, but it doesn't fully explain the behaviour of the lights. Why do they sometimes move in a straight line? Why do they sometimes appear to be moving at incredible speeds? And why do they only appear in this one particular valley? Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. The resemblance of the Hess-Darlin lights to what we would call a UFO is uncanny. They are silent, they move at incredible speeds, and they defy the laws of physics. It's no surprise that many people who have seen them believe that they are a form of extraterrestrial technology, a kind of alien surveillance of the valley. The idea is that the Hess-Darlin Valley is a kind of alien hotspot, a place that is being watched or studied by a non-human intelligence. This theory, of course, has no evidence to support it, but it speaks to the frustration the lights have caused. When a natural phenomenon defies all rational explanation, people start looking for explanations that are outside of the natural world. Another, more grounded but still very fringe theory, is that the lights are a form of ball lightning, a rare and unexplained phenomenon that is also a form of atmospheric plasma. The idea is that the lights are a kind of electrical discharge, a kind of ball of plasma that is created by a thunderstorm or by the unique geology of the valley. The theory is plausible, but it doesn't fully explain the long duration of the lights. Ball lightning is usually a fleeting phenomenon, lasting only a few seconds. The Hess-Darlin lights can last for hours. Historians and scientists still argue whether the lights are a form of natural phenomenon or a form of something else. The natural explanation is the most straightforward, but it has some serious problems. The something else explanation is the most intriguing, but it has no evidence to support it. The lights are a beautiful example of a mystery that is both historical and deeply personal. It's a historical puzzle, but it's also a deeply human one. It's a reminder that there are still things in this world that we don't understand, and that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not about a lost civilization or a vanished person. They are about a single place, a single valley, and a single, unanswerable question. Let's imagine you're a scientist in the Hess-Darlin project, a research group that has been studying the lights since the 1980s. You have all the best equipment, cameras, spectrometers, seismometers. You're a scientist and you believe in the power of reason and logic, but you're also a human being, and you have seen the lights with your own eyes. You have seen them move in ways that defy all logic. You have seen them appear out of nowhere and disappear into the ether. You have a theory, a plausible one, but you also have a sense of unease. You can't shake the feeling that what you're looking at is not a natural phenomenon, but something else entirely. Remember the Devil's Footprints of Devon? They were a physical manifestation of a mystery. The Hess-Darlin lights are the opposite. They're a kind of historical ghost, a haunting presence in a world full of noise, and in that way they are a much more unsettling kind of mystery. A footprint can be explained away. But a silent, floating ball of light that appears out of nowhere? That's something that is much harder to explain. The lights are a kind of historical ghost, a haunting presence in a world full of noise. The Hess-Darlin lights are a beautiful example of a mystery that is both historical and deeply personal. It's a historical puzzle, but it's also a deeply human one. It's a reminder that there are still things in this world that we don't understand, and that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not about a lost civilization or a vanished person. They are about a single place, a single valley, and a single, unanswerable question. And as you look at the picture of the lights, you can't help but feel a sense of unease. It's a feeling that says, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I know it's not normal. It's a reminder that the world is a much stranger place than we ever thought possible. And in some ways, that's the most profound mystery of all. The silent, hovering lights of Hess-Darlin now recede, their unexplained brilliance fading into the stillness of a Norwegian night. Let's trade the silent mountains for the vast, unforgiving silence of the sea. You're now on a brigantine-class ship, the Dei Gratia, a small cargo vessel sailing from New York to Genoa, Italy. The year is 1872, and the ocean is your home. You're a friend and a terrifying adversary. You've been at sea for a while, and you are accustomed to the quiet rhythms of life on the water. But on the afternoon of December 4th, something changes. Your lookout spots a ship in the distance, a large brigantine. It's a beautiful ship, and it's sailing erratically. As you get closer, you see something that makes your blood run cold. The ship is a derelict. It's sailing with its sails half furled, and it's completely silent. You hail it. No answer. This is the Mary Celeste, and she is one of the most famous ghost ships in all of maritime history. Mainstream historical fact is that the Mary Celeste, a 100-foot-long cargo ship, was found adrift in the Atlantic Ocean with its lifeboat missing, and its crew of 7, along with the captain's wife and their 2-year-old daughter, completely gone. The ship itself was in surprisingly good condition. The cargo, a shipment of denatured alcohol, was mostly intact. The captain's logbook was still on the table, and the last entry was on November 24th, 10 days before the ship was found. The sailors' personal belongings were still in their quarters. There was food on the table, and the ship's chronometer was still working. The only things missing were the lifeboat, the captain's navigational instruments, and the entire crew. No one knows what happened. The mystery of the Mary Celeste has baffled historians and maritime experts for over a century. The ship was a solid vessel, and the crew was experienced and well regarded. Captain Benjamin Briggs was a seasoned sailor, and he was travelling with his family. The idea that he would have abandoned his ship and his livelihood for no reason is completely absurd. But the fact remains, the ship was found, and the crew was gone. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit, the most fantastical explanation for the disappearance of the crew is that they were taken by a sea monster. The idea is that a giant squid, or some kind of mythical beast, rose from the depths and grabbed the crew, one by one, and dragged them into the sea. This theory is of course a wild leap of faith, but it speaks to the frustration the ship has caused. When a historical event defies all rational explanation, people start looking for explanations that are outside of the historical record. The sea is a vast and mysterious place, and the idea that something from the depths could have taken the crew is a terrifying and romantic one. Another, more grounded, but still very fringe theory, is that the crew was a victim of a mutiny. The idea is that a crew member, or a group of crew members, took over the ship, killed the captain and his family, and then fled in the lifeboat. This theory is supported by the fact that the crew was a bit of a mixed bag, with some new members and some old ones. But the lack of any blood, or any signs of a struggle on the ship, makes this theory seem unlikely. A mutiny would have been a violent and bloody affair. The ship was clean. It was in good condition. It was as if the crew had simply walked off the ship and vanished into the ether. Historians and maritime experts still argue whether the disappearance of the crew was an accident, a mutiny, or a form of maritime law. The accident theory is the most straightforward. The idea is that a fire or an explosion, perhaps caused by the denatured alcohol, caused the captain to order the crew into the lifeboat. The captain, a cautious man, would have used the lifeboat to get the crew away from the ship, and then, after the danger had passed, they would have been able to get back on board. But they never did. The theory is that the lifeboat, perhaps caught in a storm, was lost at sea, and the crew perished. This theory is plausible, but it doesn't fully explain the fact that the captain would have taken his family and his chronometer, but left the ship's logbook behind. It also doesn't explain the fact that the ship was found in good condition. Let's imagine you are Captain Briggs and you are sailing with your family. The sea is calm and the sky is clear. You are a seasoned sailor and you're comfortable in your home on the water. Suddenly something happens. You don't know what it is. It could be a fire or an explosion or a sudden squall. You make a split-second decision to get your family and your crew into the lifeboat. You grab your navigational instruments, your most important tool, and you get into the small boat. You're expecting to be back on the ship in a few minutes, after the danger has passed. But it never does. The sea is a vast and unforgiving place, and your small boat is a speck in a large ocean. You are lost. You are alone. And you are a ghost story. Remember the lost Roman legion of Cari? Their story was about a group of people who simply disappeared from the historical record. The Mary Celeste is a similar mystery, but it's a much more personal one. It's not about a group of soldiers, but about a group of families, with women and children. It's about a group of people who had a life, a dream, a purpose, and that life simply vanished. The case of the Mary Celeste is a beautiful example of a mystery that is both historical and deeply personal. It's a historical puzzle, but it's also a deeply human one. It's a reminder that there are still things in this world that we don't understand, and that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not about a lost civilization or a vanished person. They are about a single ship, a single crew, and a single, unanswerable question. And as you look at the picture of the ship, you can't help but feel a sense of unease. It's a feeling that says, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I know it's not normal. It's a reminder that the world is a much stranger place than we ever thought possible. And in some ways, that's the most profound mystery of all. The ghostly silence of the Mary Celeste and its vanished crew now floats away on the cold Atlantic breeze. We'll leave the open sea behind and venture into a different kind of wilderness, one that is cold, unforgiving, and deeply, deeply silent. You're now in the Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. The year is 1959, and it's late January. You're one of 10 experienced hikers, a group of students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, all of them young, healthy, and full of life. You're on a skiing expedition, a challenging trek to a mountain called a Torten, which in the local Mansi language means don't go there. You laugh at the name. It's just a mountain after all. What could possibly go wrong? Mainstream historical fact is that the group, led by a 23-year-old student named Igor Dyatlov, never made it to their destination. A search party was sent out when they failed to return on schedule. What the search party found on a slope of a mountain known as Kholat Shakhl, or Dead Mountain, was a scene of utter inexplicable horror. The group's tent was found from the outside, cut open from the inside. The gear, including the skis, boots and clothing, was still inside. The footprints of the hikers led away from the tent and down toward the edge of a forest, about a mile away. The footprints were a mix of bare feet, one-booted feet, and sock-clad feet, suggesting the group had fled in a panic without taking the time to put on their clothes. The first 2 bodies were found in the woods, near the remnants of a fire, dressed only in their underwear. They had died of hypothermia. The next 3 bodies were found between the woods and the tent, suggesting they were trying to make their way back. The last 4 bodies were found months later in a ravine buried under 4 meters of snow. This is where the story gets really strange. One of the bodies had a skull fracture, 2 of the bodies had fractured ribs, and one of the bodies, the body of a woman named Lyudmila Dubinina, had her eyes and her tongue missing. The bodies showed no signs of a struggle, and no one could explain their injuries. The medical examiners, in their official report, ruled the cause of death as a compelling unknown force. The case was officially closed, and the area was sealed off for years. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. One of the most bizarre details of the story is the fact that the clothes of the last 4 victims, the ones found in the ravine, had a high level of radiation on them. The Soviet investigators who examined the clothes were baffled. Where did the radiation come from? Some people have speculated that the group was a victim of a secret Soviet military experiment, and that they were killed by a kind of radiation weapon. The idea is that the Soviet government, which was in the middle of the Cold War, was testing a new kind of weapon in a remote area, and the hikers just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This theory, of course, has no evidence to support it, but it speaks to the frustration the case has caused. When a historical event defies all rational explanation, people start looking for explanations that are outside of the historical record. Another, more grounded but still very fringe theory, is that the group was a victim of an infrasound event. The idea is that the unique topography of the valley and the wind created a kind of low-frequency sound, a kind of inaudible hum that caused the hikers to have a kind of mass panic. The infrasound would have caused them to feel a sense of intense fear, and it would have caused them to flee the tent without their clothes. The theory is plausible, but it doesn't fully explain the physical injuries of the victims. A hum would not have caused a skull fracture or fractured ribs, and it doesn't explain the missing eyes and tongue of the one victim. Historians and true crime enthusiasts still argue whether the deaths were a result of a natural disaster, a human attack, or something else entirely. The natural disaster theory is the most straightforward. The idea is that an avalanche, or a slab of snow, came down the mountain and hit the tent. The hikers, terrified, cut their way out of the tent and fled. The injuries could have been caused by the force of the snow or by the hikers themselves in their panic. But the lack of any signs of an avalanche and the fact that the footprints led away from the tent in a single orderly line makes this theory seem unlikely. The human attack theory is also a possibility. It's possible that the group was attacked by a local tribe or by a group of escaped convicts. But the lack of any signs of a struggle or any indication of their fate is still a puzzle. And the fact that the investigators found no other footprints on the mountain, except for the hikers, makes this theory seem unlikely as well. Let's imagine you're a member of the Dyatlov group. You're in a tent, and it's a cold, silent night. Suddenly, something happens. You don't know what it is. It could be a sound or a feeling or a sense of pure, unadulterated dread. You're a small group, and you are surrounded by a wilderness that is both beautiful and terrifying. You have a choice. You can stay in the tent and hope for the best, or you can flee into the night. What would you do? You would probably choose to flee, and you would be a victim of a mystery that would baffle the world for over 60 years. Remember the lost Roman legion of Cari? Their story was about a group of people who simply disappeared from the historical record. The Dyatlov group is a similar mystery, but it's a much more personal one. It's not about a group of soldiers, but about a group of young, innocent people who had a life, a dream, a purpose, and that life simply vanished. The case of the Dyatlov group is a beautiful example of a mystery that is both historical and deeply personal. It's a historical puzzle, but it's also a deeply human one. It's a reminder that there are still things in this world that we don't understand, and that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not about a lost civilization or a vanished person. They are about a single group of people, a single, unanswerable question. And as you look at the picture of the group before they left, you can't help but feel a sense of unease. It's a feeling that says, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I know it's not normal. It's a reminder that the world is a much stranger place than we ever thought possible. And in some ways, that's the most profound mystery of all. The Dyatlov group is a modern ghost story, a haunting reminder that even with all our cameras and all our technology, some questions will simply never have an answer. The Dyatlov group is not just a historical event, it's a psychological one. It's a testament to the power of the unknown. It's a reminder that even in our modern, technologically advanced world, there are still things that can happen that we just can't explain. And as you sit here, in the quiet of your room, you can't help but feel a sense of unease. It's a feeling that says, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I know it's not normal. It's a reminder that the world is a much stranger place than we ever thought possible. The Dyatlov group, the Lost Roman Legion, the Mary Celeste, the Green Children of Woolpit, the Voynich manuscript, all of these mysteries in their own way are a testament to our own limitations. They are a reminder that for all our knowledge and all our technology, there are still things that can happen that we just can't explain. They are a reminder that the world is a much stranger place than we ever thought possible, and in that strangeness there is a kind of beauty. So now, as you drift off to sleep, let the questions linger in your mind. Let the ghosts of the past, the lost sailors, the vanished hikers, the forgotten civilizations and the strange phenomena of a different world all whisper their secrets to you in the dark. Dons fight the questions. Don't try to find a rational explanation for everything. Just let them be. Let them be a part of the quiet hum of the night, a silent reminder that the world is a much stranger and more beautiful place than we ever thought possible. Let the mysteries of the past be a part of your sweet dreams.